The Apache chief's daughter nearly died. The rancher earned the tribe's eternal respect. The ranch sat alone under a wide sky, where the land stretched so far that the horizon seemed to disappear into light. Dust rose gently when the wind moved, and the grass bent as if it had learned long ago to survive without complaint. This was a place of patience and quiet strength. The rancher had lived here most of his life, and the land had shaped him just as deeply as he had shaped it. He was not a man of many words. His days followed a steady rhythm: early mornings, careful work, and evenings spent watching the sky change color as the sun went down. He fixed fences, checked water lines, cared for animals, and respected the land that fed them all. To him, work was not something to escape from. It was something that gave meaning to his days. Beyond the far edge of his property lay Apache land. There was no fence marking the border, only a change in the land's feel, something that could not be measured but was deeply understood. The rancher had learned early on that some lines were not meant to be crossed casually. The tribe had been there long before his family ever arrived, and he knew that respect began with knowing where you stood. Over the years, there had been little interaction between the ranch and the tribe. No open conflict, but no warmth either. History rested heavily between them, carried quietly in stories told around fires and passed down through generations. The rancher did not pretend to understand that history fully, but he respected it. He believed that peace did not always mean closeness. Sometimes it simply meant leaving space. From time to time, he would see riders in the distance, moving with confidence across the land. He never followed them with suspicion, only awareness. He tipped his hat if they came near enough to see, and he expected nothing in return. That was his way, simple, honest, and without hidden motives. On this particular day, the morning began like any other. The sky was clear, the air cool, and the animals restless in that gentle way that meant the day would be warm later on. The rancher finished his chores and took a moment to drink water, leaning against a post and listening to the sounds of the land. Birds called out. The wind whispered through dry grass. Everything felt ordinary, steady, and calm. By midday, the sun climbed higher and the heat settled in. The rancher rode out to check a far section of land near the boundary. It was not unusual for him to patrol that area. Storms sometimes damaged the ground there, and he liked to make sure nothing needed fixing. His horse moved easily, familiar with the path, hooves pressing softly into the earth. As he rode, the rancher noticed something different. The birds had gone quiet. The air felt tense, as if the land itself was holding its breath. He slowed his horse, scanning the area. Years of living close to nature had taught him to trust these small signs. They were never meaningless. Then he heard it, a faint sound carried by the wind. It was not loud, but it was wrong. A broken rhythm, a sign of trouble. The rancher guided his horse forward, careful and alert. He did not rush, but he did not turn away either. Near a rocky slope close to the border, he saw movement on the ground. At first, he could not tell what it was. He dismounted and walked slowly, his steps measured. As he drew closer, his heart tightened. A young woman lay there motionless, her horse standing nearby, restless and confused. The rancher stopped several feet away. He recognized her immediately, not by name but by belonging. She was Apache. Her clothing, her presence, the quiet dignity even in stillness made that clear. And more than that, she was young. Far too young to be lying alone like this under the burning sun. He did not touch her right away. He knew enough to understand the weight of the moment. Crossing into this situation was not just about helping an injured person. It meant stepping into a world shaped by deep traditions and careful boundaries. Many men would have turned back, fearing misunderstanding or anger, but the rancher saw more than boundaries. He saw a life in danger. He knelt carefully, keeping his movements slow and visible. He spoke softly, not expecting an answer, but believing that calm words mattered even when no one seemed to hear. He checked her breathing, steady but weak, and noticed signs that she had fallen hard. The sun had already taken its toll. Time mattered now. The rancher moved with purpose. He shaded her face, gave her water in small amounts, and did what he could to make her more comfortable. He did not panic. Panic helped no one. His hands were steady, guided by years of handling difficult situations alone. As he worked, he kept looking toward the horizon. He knew others would come looking for her. Someone would notice her absence. Someone would follow her trail. Until then, he would not leave. Minutes passed slowly, stretching into something heavier. The rancher stayed alert, listening for hoofbeats, watching for movement. His presence there was both necessary and risky, but he accepted that without complaint. At one point, the young woman stirred slightly, her brow tightening as if caught between dreams and pain. The rancher spoke again, gentle and reassuring. He did not use names. He did not claim familiarity. He simply offered calm, steady words like an anchor in rough water. When distant riders finally appeared, the rancher stood slowly and stepped back. He raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. The Apache riders approached with caution, eyes sharp, bodies tense. They took in the scene quickly, the injured young woman, the rancher nearby, the careful distance he kept. No one spoke at first. The rancher met their gaze without challenge. He nodded once, a simple gesture of respect. He explained in plain words what he had found and what he had done. He did not add emotion or defense. He did not exaggerate his actions. He let the truth stand on its own. The riders listened. Some remained guarded, others thoughtful. They moved to care for the young woman, working together with quiet efficiency. The rancher stepped farther back now, understanding that his role was ending. Before leaving, he looked once more at the young woman. He hoped she would recover. He hoped that his presence would not cause trouble for her or her people. He did not expect thanks. He only hoped that doing what was right would be enough. As he rode back toward his ranch, the land felt different. The sky was the same, the wind unchanged, but something unseen had shifted. The rancher did not know it yet, but this ordinary man, on an ordinary day, had stepped into a moment that would change far more than he could imagine. The quiet border between two worlds had been crossed, not by force or pride, but by simple human action. And the story, though only beginning, had already taken its first breath. The sun was already leaning toward the west when the rancher turned his horse back toward the rocky slope. He had not planned to return, but something inside him would not settle. After meeting the riders and leaving the young woman in their care, he tried to focus on his work. Yet his hands moved without attention, and his thoughts kept drifting back to the same image, her still form on the ground, the shallow rise of her chest, the way the heat pressed down without mercy. By late afternoon, a dust cloud appeared near the boundary. More riders were coming. The rancher stopped what he was doing and waited. He did not ride toward them. He stood still, open and visible, the way a man does when he has nothing to hide. The riders slowed as they reached him. This group was larger, older men among them, faces marked by years of responsibility. Their expressions were not friendly, but not openly hostile either. They looked at the rancher as if measuring him, not just his actions, but his heart. One man stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. The rancher understood enough of the words to know they were asking about what had happened. He answered simply, repeating what he had already said earlier. He spoke slowly, choosing honesty over speed. He explained where he found her, how the fall looked, how the heat had worsened her condition, and what small steps he had taken to help. The men listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a long pause. The rancher did not fill it with excuses or extra words. Silence, he had learned, was sometimes the most respectful response. At last, one of the men nodded. Another motioned for the rancher to follow at a distance. There was no clear invitation, but also no command to leave. The rancher understood. He mounted his horse and followed slowly, keeping space between them. They reached a shaded area where the young woman now lay on a blanket, surrounded by family members. Her breathing was still weak, her face pale under the dust. Someone held her hand. Someone else wiped her forehead. The air was heavy with worry, the kind that needs no words. The rancher stayed back, his presence quiet. He did not step closer unless motioned. When someone asked a question, he answered. When no one spoke, he remained silent. As the hours passed, the heat did not break. The sun burned low and red, stretching shadows across the land. The young woman did not wake. A quiet tension settled over everyone present. Time seemed to slow, each minute pulling long and thin. One of the elders spoke to the group. The rancher did not understand every word, but he felt the weight of them. Decisions were being made. A plan was forming. The nearest place with better shelter and care was far, and moving her too quickly could be dangerous. Waiting too long could be worse. The rancher listened, thinking carefully. He cleared his throat softly, drawing attention without forcing it. When the elders looked his way, he spoke again, gently. He mentioned his ranch. He explained that he had a shaded barn, clean water, and space where she could rest without being moved again soon. He made it clear that the choice was theirs. He would not be offended if they refused. The suggestion hung in the air. Trust did not come easily here. The rancher knew that. He waited, heart steady, face open. He did not argue, he did not press. After a long discussion among themselves, the elders reached a decision. They nodded once, slowly. The rancher felt a quiet breath leave his chest. He did not smile. He simply nodded back. The move was done carefully. The rancher led the way at a slow pace, making sure the path was as smooth as possible. No one rushed. Every step was measured. When they reached the barn, the space felt cool compared to the open land. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the wood, soft and gentle. The rancher stepped aside as the family arranged the space around the young woman. He fetched water, clean cloth, anything asked of him. Nothing more, nothing less. Night came slowly, bringing cooler air but also deeper worry. A small fire burned outside the barn. People took turns watching over her. The rancher stayed nearby but never intruded. He rested against a post, eyes open, listening. At times, quiet murmurs drifted through the air. At other times, there was only the sound of breathing and the distant call of night birds. The rancher thought about how easily life could change. A simple ride, a sudden fall, one moment dividing before and after. Near midnight, the young woman stirred. It was slight, barely noticeable, but someone saw it. Voices hushed instantly. A hand squeezed hers. A name was spoken softly. Her eyes opened just a little. The rancher watched from where he stood, not moving. Her gaze drifted, unfocused at first, then steadied. She looked at the faces around her, confusion passing across her features. When her eyes briefly met the rancher's, there was no fear in them, only tired curiosity. She closed her eyes again, but her breathing grew stronger. Relief spread quietly through the group like a slow wave. No one celebrated. No one spoke loudly, but shoulders eased. Tension softened. One of the elders approached the rancher. He thanked him, not with grand words, but with a simple nod and a few quiet sentences. The rancher accepted it the same way, without pride. He replied that he had only done what was needed. The rest of the night passed with careful watching. By morning, the young woman was more stable. She could drink small amounts of water. Her breathing no longer struggled. The danger was not gone, but it had stepped back. When the sun rose, light filled the barn again. The rancher stepped outside, letting the fresh air fill his lungs. He felt tired but clear. Whatever happened next was no longer in his hands. Later that day, the elders spoke again among themselves. The rancher was not part of the discussion. He did not expect to be. He focused on his work, fixing what needed fixing, feeding his animals, letting life continue its rhythm. Before they left, the chief himself approached. His presence was calm but powerful, a man used to carrying responsibility. He looked at the rancher for a long moment, then spoke. His words were measured. He acknowledged the care given, the respect shown, the patience held. The rancher listened with his head slightly bowed. When the group finally departed, carrying the young woman with care and hope, the rancher watched them go. Dust rose and settled. Hoofbeats faded. The land returned to its quiet state, yet something remained. The rancher felt it as he stood there alone again. A shift. A change not marked by fences or lines, but by understanding. What began as a moment of urgency had grown into something deeper, something built not on words, but on choices made when it mattered most. And though the hardest part was still ahead, the bond forming in that quiet barn would soon be tested in ways none of them yet understood. The days that followed felt slower than usual, as if time itself had decided to move with caution. The rancher returned to his routine, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every sound carried a little more weight. Every quiet moment seemed fuller, charged with thoughts he did not try to chase away. He rose before sunrise each morning, as he always had. The sky still turned from dark blue to soft gold. The animals still needed care. The fences still needed watching. Life did not pause just because something meaningful had happened. Yet inside him, there was a steady awareness that the simple border he had respected for so long no longer felt the same. Word traveled quietly. He did not hear it directly, but he sensed it. Riders passed near the edge of his land more often. They did not approach, but they did not avoid him either. Sometimes he felt eyes on him from a distance, not sharp or angry, but curious, thoughtful. At night, when the wind moved through the grass, he thought about the young woman. He wondered how she was healing. Whether she could walk yet, whether she remembered anything from that day. He hoped she felt safe. He hoped the pain had eased. He did not ride out to ask. He did not send messages. He believed that respect also meant patience. Several days later, a small group arrived near his ranch in the late afternoon. The rancher saw them coming and stepped out onto open ground where he could be clearly seen. He did not carry anything in his hands. He stood calmly, waiting. This group was different. There were younger men among them, but also elders. Their expressions were serious. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a steady voice. The rancher listened carefully. The words were not harsh, but they were direct. They explained that the young woman was improving, but slowly. The fall had been harder than anyone first realized. She would recover, but only because help had come when it did. That truth mattered. The rancher nodded. He said he was glad to hear she was stronger. There was another pause. Then one of the elders spoke again. He said that not everyone in the tribe agreed about what had happened. Some believed the rancher should not have been there at all. Others believed that ignoring a life in danger would have been worse. Old memories, old wounds, and old fears had surfaced. The rancher listened without reacting. He did not argue. He understood that trust was never simple, especially when history stood between people. The elder continued. He said the council would meet. They would talk. They would decide what the rancher's actions truly meant. Until then, there would be watchful eyes and careful distance. The rancher accepted this. He said he would continue his work and respect their process. He did not ask for protection or promises. He believed that truth did not need force to stand. The group left as quietly as they had come. That night the rancher slept lightly. Dreams came and went, filled with open land and shifting shadows. He woke before dawn, rested but alert. The following days tested his patience. Small things went wrong around the ranch. Loose boards, broken tools, restless animals. Nothing serious, but enough to pull at his nerves. Still, he worked steadily, reminding himself that calm was a choice made again and again. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds gathered fast and wind swept across the land. The rancher hurried to secure what he could. Rain followed, heavy and loud, turning dust into mud and washing the ground clean. When the storm passed, the land looked new. The air felt sharp and fresh. The rancher stood for a moment, breathing deeply, feeling the balance return. That same evening, riders came again. This time, the chief himself was among them. The rancher felt the weight of that presence immediately. He removed his hat and waited. The chief dismounted and stood facing him. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was depth, years of responsibility, care for his people, and the burden of every decision. The chief spoke slowly. He said the council had talked long into the night. Voices had risen and fallen. Memories had been shared. Questions had been asked. He said that what the rancher did could not be judged by fear alone. The rancher listened, heart steady, eyes lowered slightly in respect. The chief continued. He said the young woman had spoken. She remembered waking briefly. She remembered a calm voice. She remembered feeling protected, not threatened. That memory carried weight. Still, the chief said, respect did not come from one moment alone. It came from patterns, from behavior shown when no reward was expected. The rancher nodded. He said he understood. The chief looked at him for a long moment. Then he said the words that shifted everything. He said the rancher would be allowed to stand before the elders and speak for himself, not to defend, not to explain, but to be seen fully. This was not a punishment. It was not a gift. It was a test of truth. The rancher agreed without hesitation. The days leading up to the meeting felt heavy. He did not rehearse words. He did not plan speeches. He believed that honesty did not need preparation beyond being lived. When the day came, he rode out with the group, stopping at the edge of the tribal gathering space. He dismounted and waited to be invited forward. When the signal came, he walked calmly, aware of many eyes on him. The elders sat in a wide circle. The air was quiet. The rancher stood in the center, hands relaxed at his sides. He felt no fear, only responsibility. He spoke when asked. He told the story as it happened without adding drama or removing fault. He said he did not think about land or borders in that moment. He thought about heat, injury, and time. He said he would make the same choice again, not because he was brave, but because leaving would have stayed with him forever. When he finished, he said nothing more. Silence followed, long, deep, honest. The elders spoke among themselves. The rancher waited, breathing slowly, trusting the truth to stand without him pushing it forward. At last, the chief rose. He said that respect was not given lightly. It was earned through action, patience, and humility. He said the rancher had shown all three. He said that what happened would be remembered, not as a crossing of lines, but as a moment when humanity stood above fear. The rancher felt a quiet warmth settle in his chest, not pride, not victory, just peace. As he rode back toward his ranch that evening, the land felt wide and open again. The sky stretched endlessly above him. He knew that something lasting had been built, not loud or dramatic, but strong. The night settled gently, and with it came the understanding that trust, once earned, carried a responsibility of its own, and the rancher was ready to carry it. The morning after the council meeting felt different from any other morning the rancher had known. The sun rose the same way it always did, slow and steady, spreading light across the land. Yet the air carried a quiet sense of change, like the moment after a long storm when the ground is still wet but the danger has passed. The rancher went about his work as usual. He fed the animals, checked the water, and walked the fence line. His movements were calm, but his thoughts were deep. Being allowed to stand before the elders had been an honor, but it also carried weight. Respect, once earned, was not something to take lightly. It came with responsibility. As the day moved on, visitors arrived again. This time, they did not stop at a distance. A small group from the tribe rode directly toward the ranch house. The rancher stepped forward to meet them, his posture open, his face calm. They greeted him with quiet nods. No long speeches were made. One of the elders explained that the chief's daughter was recovering well now. She could sit up, speak clearly, and walk with support. Her strength was returning slowly but surely. The rancher felt relief settle through him. He thanked them simply without asking more questions than needed. Then the elder said something unexpected. The chief's daughter wished to see him. The rancher did not respond right away. He was careful, thoughtful. He asked if that was truly what she wanted, not something asked on her behalf. The elder smiled slightly and said yes. She had asked herself. They agreed on a time and place. Nothing grand, nothing formal. Just a quiet meeting near the edge of the land where both sides felt comfortable. When the day came, the rancher rode out slowly. He stopped where he had been told and waited. He did not rehearse words. He trusted that the right ones would come. Soon, riders appeared. Among them was the young woman, sitting tall on her horse, though her movements were still careful. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strong and clear. They stopped a few steps away from him. The rancher removed his hat and waited. She spoke first. Her voice was steady, though soft. She thanked him for staying when she could not protect herself. She said she remembered his calm voice and the shade he gave her from the sun. She said that in a moment when fear could have taken over, he had chosen patience. The rancher listened closely. When it was his turn, he spoke with honesty. He said he was glad she was healing. He said he did not act for praise or thanks. He said he only hoped she would live to ride again, to laugh again, to carry her own story forward. She smiled at that. Before leaving, she reached into a small pouch and handed him a simple token. It was not valuable in the usual sense, but it was meaningful. She said it was given only when respect was earned, not borrowed. The rancher accepted it with both hands and bowed his head slightly. After that meeting, the space between the ranch and the tribe began to change in small but noticeable ways. Riders would stop and speak instead of passing silently. Greetings were exchanged. Short conversations happened about weather, land, and animals. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. One afternoon, a problem arose that tested this growing trust. A group of cattle wandered too close to tribal land after a fence section weakened during heavy winds. In the past, this could have caused tension, accusations, harsh words. This time the rancher noticed the problem early and rode out to fix it. Before he could finish, tribal riders arrived. Instead of confrontation, there was cooperation. They helped guide the cattle back safely. The fence was repaired together. No one spoke about the past. They focused on the present. That simple moment carried more meaning than any ceremony. As weeks passed, the chief invited the rancher to attend a gathering. It was not a public celebration. It was a shared meal, meant to mark understanding rather than victory. The rancher considered the invitation carefully. He knew such moments mattered. He accepted with respect. On the evening of the gathering, he arrived dressed simply. He did not bring gifts meant to impress, only what was appropriate and sincere. He followed the guidance given and waited to be welcomed. The gathering was calm and warm. Stories were shared. Food was passed. Laughter rose gently without noise or excess. The rancher listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was with care. The chief addressed the group at one point. He spoke about the meaning of respect and how it was proven, not claimed. He said that the rancher's actions had reminded them all that humanity came before fear. The words were not dramatic, but they were powerful. Later that night, as the rancher rode home under a sky full of stars, he felt something he had not expected. Not pride, but belonging. Not ownership, but connection. The land no longer felt divided in the same way. Boundaries still existed, but they were no longer sharp with mistrust. They were understood, honored, and shared with awareness. In the days that followed, the rancher noticed that his own way of seeing the world had shifted. He paid closer attention. He listened more carefully. He understood that respect was something that grew, like land tended patiently over time. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun fade, he thought about how close everything had come to going wrong. How easily fear could have taken control. How one decision, made quietly and without witnesses, had changed the path of many lives. He realized that true respect was not earned in loud moments. It was built in silence, through steady choices made when no one demanded them. The wind moved softly across the land. Somewhere in the distance, a horse called out. The rancher smiled faintly and rested back in his chair. What had begun as a moment of crisis had become a bridge, and that bridge, once formed, would carry more than just one story. It would carry understanding forward, long after the dust of that first day had. The rancher's life returned to its familiar rhythm, but beneath the routine, something lasting had taken root. The land felt the same under his boots, yet his place within it felt deeper, more connected than before. He continued his work without change. He rose early, cared for the animals, repaired what broke, and watched the sky for signs of weather. But now there were moments when riders from the tribe passed close enough to exchange words. Sometimes they stopped to talk about water levels or grazing paths. Sometimes they simply nodded and moved on. These small exchanges were not dramatic, but they were meaningful. They showed trust growing in its own quiet way. The chief's daughter recovered fully with time. Word of her strength traveled gently, carried by shared stories rather than announcements. She returned to riding with confidence, her posture proud and steady. When she passed near the ranch on occasion, she would raise her hand in greeting. The rancher always returned the gesture, nothing more, nothing less. The token she had given him remained in his pocket most days. He did not show it to others. He did not speak about it. Its value was not in being seen, but in being remembered. It reminded him that actions, once taken, carried echoes far beyond the moment. One summer afternoon, trouble came again, as it often does when least expected. A dry season had stretched longer than usual, and water grew scarce in certain areas. Tension could have returned easily. The land did not belong to one side alone, and the need for resources pressed everyone equally. Instead of waiting for conflict, the chief sent word. A meeting was requested, calm and direct. The rancher agreed without hesitation. They met in open space under a wide sky where no walls stood between them. The conversation was honest. Water sources were discussed. Boundaries were respected. Solutions were shared. The rancher offered access to a well on certain days. The tribe offered guidance on protecting the land from further strain. No one raised their voice. No one claimed victory. The land came first. That meeting marked something important. It showed that respect was no longer tied to one event alone. It had become part of how problems were faced together. As the years passed, the story of what happened that day near the rocky slope did not fade. It was told quietly, without exaggeration. It was spoken of not as a tale of heroism, but as an example of how a single choice could shift the path of many lives. The rancher never corrected the story, even when it changed slightly with each telling. He knew that stories belonged to the people who carried them. What mattered was the lesson they held. One evening, long after the dust of those early days had settled, the rancher was invited once more to a gathering. This time it was larger. Families came. Elders spoke. Children listened. The chief stood and addressed everyone. He spoke about memory and responsibility. He spoke about how respect, once earned, became something that must be protected, just like land or water. He said the rancher's name aloud, not as a title, but as a reminder. The rancher felt the weight of that moment settle over him. He stood when asked, removed his hat and bowed his head. When he spoke, his words were simple. He said he was grateful. He said he had learned as much as he had given. He said that respect was something he would continue to earn every day. The gathering ended with shared food and quiet laughter. Children ran freely between groups, unaware of old divisions. The sound of voices blended into the evening air, carried gently by the wind. Later that night, as the rancher rode home beneath the stars, he thought about how life had shaped him. He had not set out to change anything beyond his own land. Yet life had asked more of him, and he had answered without knowing the cost or reward. The ranch grew older with him, posts weathered, Trees grew taller, seasons came and went. Through it all, the understanding between the ranch and the tribe held steady. When the rancher eventually slowed, when his steps became more careful and his mornings less rushed, younger hands took over the work. They had heard the story. They understood the values behind it. Respect, patience, and responsibility were passed on, not as rules but as living examples. The chief's daughter became a leader in her own right. She carried herself with the same calm strength she had shown during her recovery. When she spoke, people listened. When she acted, others followed. She never forgot the day her life had nearly slipped away, nor the quiet man who had chosen to stay. Years later, when the rancher's name was spoken among the tribe, it was done with warmth. Not because he was perfect, but because he had acted when it mattered most. The land remembered too. Grass grew where hooves once struggled. Water flowed where care was given. The border between worlds remained, but it was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of understanding. In the end, the story was not about saving a life alone. It was about what followed, about how respect once earned could last longer than memory itself. And somewhere under that wide sky, where dust met wind and silence held meaning, a simple truth remained clear. Real respect is not demanded or declared. It is lived quietly through choices made when no one is watching.